Hi, I'm Rob Skiff. I'm the CEO of Oplerno, and this is Higher Ed Revolution number 4. This week we're going to be talking, Jesse's going to be doing an interview that he's going to talk about in just a bit. We're also going to talk about what's been happening in the last couple of weeks with Oplerno, and also I'll be making an announcement too. So we'd really like to do a shout out to all the contributors and the new faculty that we've been getting last week and are working hard to do their onboarding, for their classes. So Jesse, how was last week? Little nuts, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But how was the interview? And tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, the interview was fantastic. Debbie was getting over a little bit of the spring fever, but she still made some nice time to chat with me. The whole 30-minute discussion was invigorating and refreshing, I would say.
There'll also be a link to the full interview right here when it's going on. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so that aside. Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, we talked a lot about the dynamics between student and teacher, millennial and sort of, older generations. We even got into critical discussion and participation, things that our old friend Paulo Freire spoke and wrote about a lot, and talked about technology, how it's making its way into the classroom, what we can do to better utilize it. And then finally, we even had a very unique discussion that sort of relates to Oplerno in the sense that, we want teachers to think about what they can create and why, and how to begin to build a learning community around it. So I asked her that very, very specific question, and I'm excited to have you listen in.
Yep.
All right, Debbie, thank you for joining me. I think it's probably just as sunny by you as it is by me, right? It's kind of gorgeous here.
It's beautiful.
That's good to hear. So I reached out to you because of an article that I had read called Rediscovering Wonder, which we will definitely get into in a bit. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about your background. From what I know, you're a principal of K-12 arts as well as learning design and development in Ontario, Canada. And as I mentioned, you write for our publication, Higher Ed Revolution on Medium, featuring one of Rediscovering Wonder, which is one of those articles. Would you care to add or touch on anything more in depth?
So I found it, first of all, I found it interesting that I was invited to be an editor on your publication because I'm not part of higher ed. I'm K-12 educator. I was a teacher for about 10 years, 12, but 2 of those years were maternity leave. And really focused in the junior grades, mostly grades 4 to 6, and then worked for the Ministry of Education, eLearning Ontario. So I've dabbled in e-learning for a number of years. And then I became an administrator in a board just north of the Toronto, York Region District School Board, and was VP and principal in a few schools. And I also have some graduate work that I've done. I did a master's degree that focused on learning for English language learners and sort of disrupting the status quo around what do those programs look like. And that was I graduated in 96, so we're talking 20 years ago. And then I finished my doctorate in 2006, 10 years ago. And that was focused on really social studies curriculum, but it looked at knowledge building from a critical pedagogy perspective. So really, how do we, again, disrupt? How do we disrupt what knowledge is, who owns the knowledge, and what knowledge is considered valid, and then how do we transform that? So that's similar awesome themes, I think, that have gone through all of my learning.
That's awesome. I mean, I would speculate that the reason that you were asked to write is basically because we value at Higher Ed Revolution, I think because so much of learning flows into that moment in a sort of a young adult's life. It's incredibly important what's going on right before that or even much earlier on. So there's no perspective that is irrelevant.
That was very good to hear.
Yeah. So I guess that one of the, so you've talked a little bit about what's inspired you. I mean, Paulo Freire is definitely in that realm for me. What would you say you still do as an educator today to continue to learn sort of on your own volition?
Well, if I turn my computer, well, if I moved out of the way, you could see my color-coded bookshelf.
Awesome.
And if I turned my computer around, which I won't because it's a bit messy, you would see stacks of books that are waiting to be read. So it's really, it's cliche, but lifelong learner. So somebody will say a book and I will get it. Right now, one of the books I'm reading is this one. And it's to help me with my blog.
Cool.
And then I went to a session with Apple and they talked about this, and it's an older book, Campfires in Cyberspace. So like it talks about ancient learning and how does that, or prehistoric learning, and how do we build that into schools? So and I also teach. So I teach a principals qualification course. Mm-hmm. And I love this. I love that I've gone back to teaching. So I guess that is higher ed. Because I'm working with adults, and it just inspires me. And I look at my children, and if anyone reads my blogs, they'll see my children are throughout, because their struggles and their learning and their successes also inspire me to learn more. Plus Medium, to be honest, like I love the writing in there. I love that it's dialogic, that it invites that kind of discourse, where so many blogs, it's just, here's my thought, and then the comments are like, great writing. But with Medium, I feel that there is a back and forth that exists in that online environment that doesn't in others. So really, anywhere, everywhere, always, to your point, right? I know you write about learning anywhere.
Yeah. And I've just really started expressing myself through it. I've been reading on it for a while. I've even read articles that talk about how a lot of teachers are beginning to utilize it as a productive channel for communication and expression for kids, which I think is great. Digital technology and capabilities, they're a significant factor affecting education today, as we've been saying. I don't know if you read anything that Will Richardson writes, but he had an article recently talking about elephants in the classroom that should unsettle us. And in this article, he says, we know that learning that sticks is usually learned informally, that explicit knowledge accounts for very little of our success in professions. Instead, tacit knowledge and the ability to learn from others in the moment, both face-to-face and in networks, is vastly more important and effective. Most of what we teach kids, we teach them just in case they may need to know it someday, primarily because the system is still operating on the belief that explicit knowledge is scarce. Within the web, it's not. Those that will flourish in the modern world will be those who can learn what they need to learn just in time from a variety of networks and sources and experiences. I'm curious, obviously this touches on a lot of what we've been talking about, but what does that mean for all of what you do, not just the role of the traditional classroom, but specifically with arts, specifically with learning design and working with professional development for adults?
Well, I think with the learning design piece, so my team, what we do is we create communication and learning for the adults in the system. So it could be teachers, it can also be caretaking staff, office staff. And one way we try to stay current is to participate ourselves in this learning. We've been going to a learning conference with Elliot Maisy every year. And one of the pieces I find interesting is gamification. I'm actually torn about gamification because I feel that it's preying upon people's addictive personalities. I've never been a gamer, and that's probably part of it. So one part of technology I myself have never embraced. In the day I sort of like Tetris, but I grew up with Pong, like just to give you an idea of how old I am. It's just I think that I find it problematic. I like the leaderboards. I think that that's something that does inspire people to keep going, but it's not really inspiration. It's addictive. It's like, give me another hit. So that part for me, I'm questioning. I think also, we're trying to take the information, the learning, and put it into smaller and smaller pieces because people's attention is weaker and weaker. So even when I started in the group two years ago, our videos, we were like, they have to be under 10 minutes. It's 2 years later, and research is telling us they have to be under 3 minutes or people will lose attention.
Right.
And even in Medium, when you look and you see how many people have read it, but the percentage of what they've read, I don't know how they figure that out, how fast you scroll through, I don't know. But I find that fascinating. I think that we also have to have higher expectations of our learners. I think that if it's intriguing and inspiring, they will stay with it. So like in an elementary classroom, when we talk about behavior, and then all these teachers come up with these ways to manage behavior. It's called classroom management. And they have, 1, 2, 3 magic, or all of these hokey kind of ways to control it. But if your program is intriguing, you don't have behavior. And I think it's the same thing with online learning. Put some effort into it.
Yeah.
Make sure it's responsive. Your idea that you're saying that there's a syllabus, but there needs to be flexibility and responsiveness to it. So we're trying to create tools that are like that. You can pick and choose your topics. You can match them together. There's online content, there's webcasts, different ways of learning, but there's also reading material that can be downloaded. So you can use that in your own time, infographics, images instead of words.
Mm-hmm.
We're experimenting with all of this.
Yeah, I love the idea of all of that sort of being incorporated as just potential, and that, the teacher knows that the students know it, and there's really it's an open canvas for learning in any space at any age.
The other thing that we're finding too, and I don't know what the laws are in the U.S. or other places, but we have something, the accessibility for Ontario's Ontario, it's AODA. Now I don't know the acronym, but it's accessibility standards with online learning. Hopefully they can cut out that silly part. So it's accessibility for standards for online learning. So people who are visually impaired, hearing impaired, and we have to adjust the content that we're making. We have to offer alternative formats for what we're making. So it might be that if it's a video, there's captioning, but that benefits everybody. And so these accessibility laws have pushed us to have multiple ways of learning in everything that we create. I think it's a good thing.
That's a positive development, absolutely. Yeah. All right, well, so let me just ask one final question. Yeah. And it definitely relates to us at Oplerno a little bit, but I'm curious, since you are an educator and you've been so and now are so, you continue to be in a multitude of capacities with a variety of ages. What skills, subjects, or topics would you consider designing or building a learning community around if you had to do so in a very sort of targeted way online?
I would love to design my own learning for people who are in the role of principal and vice principal. I think that there needs to be a new way of learning for leaders. I think that leaders in schools traditionally we call them instructional leaders. And now there's a new language around it, lead learner. And the idea is that you have to show your vulnerability. You, just like a teacher in a classroom in a traditional sense, principals and vice principals in schools try to create this image of themselves that is so inauthentic. And I think what it does is it keeps teachers from expanding in their way of learning. I mean, often teachers do it in spite of the leadership in the school. Yeah. But it trickles down, right? That expression, the fish rots from the head. And, and I think that, there are so many people that go into leadership and education who don't have to continue learning. They've got their courses, that's their goal, they've accomplished it. They really don't have to do any other learning, whereas teachers continue to take additional qualifications course and get exposed to learning. Principals can be the only principal with no VP in a school. And so where's your network? And I think we have to disrupt that a little bit. I would love to design a course around that.
That's great. So what do you think, Rob?
That was a good interview. The whole piece about making faculty and students the center of learning again is really, really important. And nice job, Jesse.
Thank you.
One thing that I want to make note of is that we are moving the international offices, the US-based offices of Oplerno, where I'm at, really about 1.5 miles. I've been dealing with that for about a week. A little over a week, moving and such. So I hope, my apologies if communications have been a little bit disjointed, over the past week, but understand that my basement, the first floor, is now filled with over 1,000 books. And if you subscribe to my Instagram account, you'll see the big, huge pile. And we should be back up and running. I'm dealing with contractors and a few other things, really full in the next week or so. So please be patient, and thanks for that. Other than that, that's Jesse. Do you have any final words to say or updates that you want to put about what you're up to? Except for raising a child and doing that.
There's that. I'm also preparing for a move myself at the end of June. I'm in the midst of just publishing a recent piece on Medium through Higher Ed Revolution. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next piece, next week's meeting, number 5. So I'll just hold off for now and, let the Debbie Donsky interview speak for itself. Hopefully it is as inspiring for you as it was for me.
Great. Well, listen, take care, and please remember, if you have any questions, go to questions@oplerno.com. And again, subscribe to Higher Ed Revolution right here. And thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Ciao.
Well, one of the things that surprised me doing that kind of work is that some of the most conservative voices, to my mind, are from the students.
Doing is taking a look at, student loan debt and its relationship to financial aid and how financial aid gets calculated. Okay, the calculation.
As teachers, we have to always perceive our own ignorance and allow students to project their own knowledge.
So that's Higher Ed Rev 4. Now let me change my tie so we can do Higher Ed Rev 5. Hold on one second.
I'll be right back to you.